Good evening. As we get started, welcome to our Ritenour School Board meeting this evening. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order, and I'm going to move to the declaration of a quorum. But I want to first say that Vanessa will be participating virtually this evening, and we also want to excuse Penny for the evening, so I'm going to need a motion for that.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Lonis?
Yes.
Ms. Glover-Jones? Yes. Ms. Belbreco?
Yes.
Ms. Enriquez-Mimba? Okay. I vote yes. Motion carries. Moving to 1.03, adoption of the agenda.
Move we adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
Ms. Belbreco?
Yes.
Ms. Glover-Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Lonis?
Yes.
Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Enriquez-Mimba? Okay, and I vote yes, motion carries. Motion to, moving to Pledge of the Allegiance. Since we don't have any children, we're going to go ahead and lead it on our own. Let's go. We got this. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, moving to 1.05, School of the Month. We have Iceland here for the month of September.
Good evening, everyone. Island is really excited to be here this evening for School of the Month. I'd like to introduce a few of the teachers that I have here with me this evening. I have Mrs. Stein, who's one of our third grade teachers, as well as our professional development and equity cadre chairperson. And Mrs. Gates is also one of our third grade teachers. And as you can see, we are here to talk a little bit about a special project that we have in regards to reaching and teaching all of our students at Island. So I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Stein for just a minute to talk a little bit about the background of some of the work that we have done as a staff that has led to us providing relevant and engaging lessons for our students as a result.
So prior to the 2020-2021 school year, Island did not have a solidified equity committee. It was kind of rolled into our leadership committee. So in the 2020-2021 school year, we solidified a PD equity cadre. And the focus was to put our professional development more towards an equity focus. And the first thing we did was we purchased the 2 books seen here on the screen, Like Fragility and Despite the Best Intentions. And we use those to guide most of our work. You can see on the chart what we talked about for each of the 7 staff meetings that our cadre led. Went from everything to where did you first learn about certain different races and ethnicities, to hiring Phil Hunsberg from Educational Equity Consultants to explore impact and mindset and implicit bias. One of the other things that we did at these meetings was, as we'll talk about in a few minutes, is handing out books to teachers as well to incorporate into the classroom. So it was also important to us that we didn't just celebrate Black History Night and have a Latinx celebration, but also we're infusing this all year long. So that's sort of our overarching goal, is to empower teachers to see how equity work and restorative practices link to improve student success and engagement in the classroom. So in the classroom, what this looks like is students seeing representations of themselves through different mirrors and windows. So a mirror seeing images of themselves in books and other media, and then a window into other cultures. And so we are doing this through a variety of ways. One is the background that you just saw, giving staff background knowledge and education to help them infuse that, and then as well as literature as well.
So a last time, we had lots of conversations with the staff about the topics that this time was talking about, but often a cry that we heard from our staff members was, well, what do we do with the students? How do we bring this back and work with our students? And so one of our answers to that question was providing every single classroom or every single general education and self-contained classroom in the building some read alouds that were representative of the different students cultures that are in our school, and then giving teachers some of the tools to do activities with those books. So again, we're providing engaging and relevant lessons for our students. Last year, we purchased 5 books per classroom. All of our classrooms received the books Undefeated, Let's Talk About Race. Our primary classrooms received The Proud is Blue, Island Born, and Separate is Never Equal. And our intermediate classrooms received Proud, Color of My Words, and Sylvia and Aki. This year, we purchased an additional 5 books, and those are the pictures of the books on your right there that we'll be working through this staff. And this year, we narrowed it down so that all of our classrooms, with the exception of 1 month, will be getting the same books, so that K through 5 will have a common experience that all of our students can talk about and bring home and talk about with their families as well. When we started this project last year, we provided the teachers with lessons to do. And this screen right here is a picture of the lesson plans that we provided the teachers. So we provided them with the purposes of the lesson. We provided them with some of the logistics of how to, when do you do it, those kind of things. And then we modeled for them what a comprehensive lesson plan would look like. And knowing last year that we were in the virtual world, we provided links and virtual tools embedded into the lesson plans as well. We knew that we were going to have to provide this for students in K through 5. So this is the example actually for our 3rd through 5th grade students. And then we provided an example for our K through 2 as well. As the year went on and we gave them more books, we kind of released that responsibility back to the teachers. So they were, by February, writing lesson plans in small groups. And by the end of the year, then writing lesson plans on their own. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Gates for a little bit. So talk about what that work looked like in the classroom as she was working with students through some of these books.
So the books that you see here, they were provided to us staff members. And as a team, we wrote lessons to align with many of these books. Specifically, the Separate is Never Equal was one that the 3rd grade team created a lesson plan for. My colleague, who was not able to be here, had a lot of success in her virtual classroom, and that actually, with the discussions that she had and how her students were challenging with a variety of ideas, that pushed her to then introduce Ruby Bridges Goes to School, which is actually one of our Being a Reader books in one of our sets. So that was pretty awesome to bring both of those together and have conversations as a virtual class. Last year, I had the opportunity to read Proud, which you see off to the left, with my class in hybrid. And we had some pretty awesome conversations within the classroom. And I was able to provide literacy skills while I was reading the book. And up top, you see the anchor chart that we continuously added to while we read chapter by chapter. The 3rd grade curriculum has a vast amount of diverse text. The equity cadre has looked at the new curriculum, and there's over 100 texts in the new Being a Reader, Make Meaning, and Being a Writer curriculum that represents minority cultures. Flip to the next slide. As a 3rd grade team, we read the book Undefeated and followed a lesson plan created by Dr. Michael Mobile and Amanda Connolly. And my colleagues that taught virtual did the lessons a little differently, and we have the student samples to provide to you on the next slides.
This was a template that we provided to the students. They could make copies of and input their own information. So students chose different people spotlighted in the book to research a little bit more and then share with one another in the classroom. So here's just a few examples from the 3rd grade. Black soldiers during the Civil War. Armstrong. And then, as I said, we knew that we were going to have to teach students at different levels. So this was from some of the fourth grade classrooms. So they also did a similar activity to the one that was just shared. But this is some screenshots of a fourth grader's work and some of the activity extensions that they did. At the top box is that they looked at other words that started with un. So you can see the bottom where there's unforgettable, undesirable, so personality traits that have that prefix un. So doing some word work at the same time as looking at character traits. And then they went through and took the extension of not just determining other heroes' traits, but looking at heroes in their own lives and what made those people heroes to them. So this was one of our fourth graders at the time. And this is obviously something that we're continuing this year with the books that we've purchased. So this is just some of our future steps. We provided, again, more books. We continue the cadre work through the leadership of Mrs. Stein and Mrs. Davy helps her with that as well. And we're beginning to look at the resource assessment capable visible learners, which really connects to equity as well, because it's helping students become independent learners and recognizing where they are in terms of the where they need to be and giving them steps that they can get to where they need to be independently with, of course, the support of teachers. Again, like Ms. Gates talked about, we're making really connections to the resources that are provided in our curriculum so that we can use some of the same tools with the books that are already provided for us. And then we do have some faculty meetings set aside to continue to explore different avenues of equity. And so these are the questions that we'll be looking at this year through our faculty meetings. And then last but not least, because again, it's our goal to always bring this work then back into the classroom to our students. So what do we do for our students? This is an example from Ms. McBride's third grade classroom. And I know the third grade team has been working very closely together, that now that we're developing these resources for teachers and letting them see different representations of people, we know that changes throughout time as well. So context matters in terms of your own identity. So she's creating this read aloud timeline in her classroom so that you can kind of see, actually there's some examples up there, what time the books are, the setting of the book is, and how that changes people's perspective at that time as well. That's some of the work that we're doing currently at Iveland to reach and teach all of our students.
Well, thank you, Ms. Conley, and thanks everybody. Can you talk a little bit about, so the texts were purchased for every teacher, and there were some lessons developed. Can you talk about, were there any obstacles or was there any opposition that you had to overcome as a school to do this work well?
I haven't heard any opposition from teaching staff in terms of other than just concerns that teachers have of where do I fit it in and how do I do it virtually, particularly last year, but the content of it, we really didn't have any obstacles of. We've done a lot of the legwork through our professional development cadre of recognizing why it's so important to be representative of our student body, and we really didn't get any pushback from any of it, really.
I saw that you have a history of St. Louis and I'm in back south. My husband's grandparents came here from Italy, and so my brother has this DVD that he shared with us about the last little Italy on the hill. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's an excellent. It starts back in the 1800s and now that's where it stayed. So this is another resource that you need. Thank you.
Are these mostly scholastic books, or what was your source for books?
So it started, Ms. McBride, who is one of our teachers who's highly involved in many social justice programs. Her and I sat down, not this past summer, but the summer before, with the goal of just researching what books would be appropriate for our students. So we looked through a lot of book lists that were suggested to us. We looked through books that we knew. And the reason that we chose some of the books that we did at that time was, go back to the slide for a second. A lot of the books we chose, such as The Proudest Blue and Proud, we chose those because they had a picture book that would connect with our primary grades and a chapter book that could connect with our intermediate grades. Because one of the goals that I had as well is wanted to provide rigorous text for our older grades as well. So I don't know that they're scholastic books, but that's kind of our process for looking through them. And then as we went to this year, some of the feedback that we got from staff was that as much as they liked the chapter books, sometimes the chapter books took a lot of time to read in class. And the other piece they really liked was everybody having the same experience simultaneously. So this year we went a little bit of a different route in terms of looking at mostly picture books, but again, making sure that the picture books were appropriate for kindergartners, if the content could be comprehended, but also would still be interesting and engaging to fifth graders. So we just kind of sorted through lots of book lists and threw out ideas with one another, kind of cut down the list and kind of negotiated, I guess, back and forth what books that we wanted. And again, we wanted to make sure we were representing all of the cultures within our school too.
I'm curious, are these books like solid books? Are they virtual books? Are they both? Are they something that you can apply if it's in a virtual situation? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I'm used to old school, just hardbound books.
And that's what they are. They're hardbound books. Now the one book, Separate is Never Equal, that was purchased originally for just the primary grades, and our intermediate grades really wanted to do that as well. So we were able to have the hard copies, but then our intermediate grades found, read alouds online on YouTube and things like that, so that they could still participate and have access to the text, even if they didn't have the hardback book. But most of these are hardback books.
Any other questions? This is easy work, guys.
So it looks like a very nice selection.
Yes, and we
Covers a lot of area.
Yeah, and this year, sorry, I keep going back and forth. So we have Ian Swap, who's the primary character. It's a student who has a diagnosis of autism. The name jar is about a student from Korea. Soldier for Equality is about a Mexican man who's joined the army. So we're trying to, again, reach every different source of diversity that we have within our school as well.
Question. So this is all great, we're not concerned, but have you noticed a change or an impact?
I think we're always I think one of the things that we want to do is make sure that we're connecting with every student. Can I say that I have tangible evidence to say it's made a huge impact? I don't know, but I don't know that that's what we're after too. We're just after every student feeling like they belong and they're learning and represented. And I'm not sure how you always measure that in specifics to this project, if that makes sense.
Well, I'm thinking about, when my kids went to school, and the student teachers, here for, you know, student teacher at Wyman, and then she went to a different district. And she talked about when I saw her at Dot Socially, she said that she was so impressed with the ones who did not make fun of the SSD kids like this other. So that's what I'm wondering, are you seeing that? You're not having that, we treat them nicely.
We do a lot of measures in our school to build community and talk about how we impact one another. So I think we have a lot of work going on in our building. So I would say yes.
I can speak to my classroom. We've read the name jar already this year. And of course, I don't have any Korean students in my classroom, but just a conversation that went along with, where did you get your name? And I challenged my students to go home, ask their parents, because some didn't know. And I shared my middle name. And so we had a really good conversation that first day, but then that next day when they came back, they wanted to read it again, and they wanted to share with everybody, like, this is where my name came from. And one of my students, she did not want to share her middle name, but because I shared my middle name, she felt like we're a community and we're a family, and now I feel okay sharing it. And that was a really cool moment for all of us. And it was really cool to just hear where their names came from. And I had parents that said, she came home and she asked me, and where did this come from? And I was able to share that we read this book, and I feel like it might not be because of their heritage, but just feeling like they belong somewhere, both at home and in the classroom. I think that makes an impact.
And I would agree with that too. I was just thinking about how in social studies we came across the words recently, culture and different things like that. And the kids are just really comfortable. I don't know that I was that comfortable as a third grader to share, oh yeah, I'm from a different country, or I have this is my religion, or this is a holiday my family celebrates. And they're very eager and willing to share. And I think that that's true probably across the grades. We've heard that from other classes too.
Great.
So Ms. Stein, I understand that you've been heavily involved with the community closet that's come together as well.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your work as we're at the end of the school of the month? Can you talk a little bit about your work with the community closet?
Sure. So I, outside of school, am the vice president of the National Council, vice president of community service of the National Council of Jewish Women of St. Louis. And one of our projects is kids community closets. So we put closets into schools that need a certain percentage of free and reduced lunch. And the closets are filled with coats, underwear, socks, outfits, and usually the counselor or school social worker has the key. And they, we have one in Ireland, and then one other register that pregnancy brain that I feel about. Thank you. And so we have two here in Ritenour, as well as quite a few other schools in St. Louis that benefit from this project and this process.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you so much for all your hard work. We really appreciate you coming up this evening.
Thank you.
Board of closed session. The Board of Education met in closed session on August the 12th, 2021 for the purpose of a discussion of personal agenda items. Moving to 1.07, public comments. Any public comments this evening? Moving to 2.01, President's report. This evening, I wanted to share a fun story with you about a unique program that one of our Ritenour High School seniors took part in the summer. Elizabeth Keelock was chosen for an internship with the University of Missouri St. Louis that studied urban bee pollination. She was one of 10 students from 4 local school districts who took part in a paid internship to conduct fieldwork at community gardens in Florissant and Midtown St. Louis. Students learned about pollination biology, why it is important, and how it happens. In the process, they were exposed to the variety of bees in our area, as well as the diversity of plants and how to identify both. Along the way, they gained a much better understanding of bees, why they're not to be feared, and the important role that they play in the ecosystem. This is probably some work that she can continue here with the Bee Club at Ritenour High School. Congratulations to Elizabeth, and thank you for being such an outstanding representative of our school districts and community. The second thing that I needed to note that I wanted to kind of get a consensus on is the expectations concerning filing for the Board of Candidacy, which is now going to be December the 7th through December the 28th. A couple of questions were brought up. One of them is that the first day will still be a lottery, and the last day will be business as usual. And so the last person that comes in will be the last person on the ballot. And so I was just kind of wanting to get kind of a consensus and a feel if this might be also something that we might need to discuss maybe next week, but just kind of see where people are on that, whether we should still take it here at our administration building or we're looking at the St. Louis County Board of Elections.
So are you saying that the St. Louis County Board of Elections lottery on the first day?
Yes.
We got that. How do we know that?
I emailed Hannah Valley, Sept County,
So we have lottery on the first day.
First day, so, yeah, so we had it on the first day and last day.
any other questions? Okay, do you have any other questions?
Days, it's done at some of those days in there?
Just the holidays, the Christmas Eve, Christmas days.
And we,
Just the 28th.
Yeah, so weekends, right? And then the Christmas holidays on Saturday, so it would be the day before the 24th.
Is there a day that we have to let them know by or make this decision by?
No, it's more about notification to the community for candidates, which generally will go out in the local light. We'll want to get that out, as far in advance as possible. So the sooner the board can make the decision, the better.
I think doing all that and knowing that they're almost like in our backyard anyway, I mean, it's a 5-minute drive from there. It's not asking anyone to drive where it used to be down. You said it was Kirkwood or Maplewood? 35, 40 minutes from here. It's a reasonable expectation that be able to drive over there, so we'll stay on.
Is this something that we need to vote on, or is it that we just need to give you a decision?
So if there's consensus reached tonight, the board could move with that. If this is something the board would want to put to a vote, it's not on the agenda. That would have to come at a later time. There's a clear consensus tonight. It doesn't require board action because there's no cost.
So are we asking if anybody has any concerns about it, or is everybody going to consent?
how do you expect my concern is we got the answer to that one, and so I'm concerned about we do for election, so.
Yeah, my concern is not having Michelle here, but we're all, yes,
Well-
that's my biggest concern. I don't want Michelle to have to be here and work when everybody else is, right, so I'm okay with it. I know it's a change, it's different, but I'm okay with it. Any other concerns, or can we go ahead and go ahead?
What do you guys think?
I'm fine with you.
I'm good.
Okay, I think we're all good with this, so I think the sooner we let the community know, so that they, it's not big, yeah, absolutely.
Thank
you.
It'll be good. We'll change here and there.
Just me, yes. All right. And just so everybody knows that might be sitting here, this is, the change is actually because of a law that was changed not by us, so it was a law that was changed, and so we're conforming to the law.
Yeah, change the
The
time frame.
time frame of when you can file. Any other questions? Are we good? We can move to 2.02, the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Alvin. So board members, tonight, we're happy to welcome Mr. Matt Berry and Dr. Sherry Severe. So Matt, Sherry, if you'd please come up.
It's not often that I get to give money away. I'm pleased to give a big check to Matt Bakery, actually to the Ritenour School District. So Dr. Kilbride, Dr. Ellen Wilson, Board of Education members, thank you so much for providing me with the opportunity to recognize an outstanding school counselor. My name is Dr. Sherry Severe. I'm the Director of Advocacy for the Missouri School Counselor Association. Matthew Berry has distinguished himself to be a visionary and a leader of field school counseling. Matt was elected to the Missouri School Counselor Association's Board of Directors a little over 4 years ago. He was quickly elected by the board to be its first ever chair. This was a daunting task because MSCA was in the process of adopting a new form of governance and representation. Matt quickly learned the process and successfully led the board to full implementation of the new governance structure. This board had the responsibility of responding to questions and calming the nerves of members who were concerned with changing the way things had always been done. Matt's leadership helped MSCA not to just succeed, he led MSCA to thrive. So it's not surprising that the board re-elected Matt for a second term, and that term happened to be during the pandemic. Again, his leadership allowed MSBA to be creative and innovative in providing services to its members, such as holding a virtual state conference, offering monthly professional development via Zoom, holding level sharing sessions, sending newsletters twice a month, and much more. Members were extremely grateful for the support and attention of the association during such trying times. And they loved the happy hour Zoom sessions that Matt led. Now, I'm sure you know well that Matt Berry is a rock star in the field of school counseling. His workshops are filled with capacity at the state and national levels. Being with him is like being with a celebrity, and I'll happily admit I'm a fan. As a token of our appreciation for his leadership, the Missouri School Counselor Association is donating $1,000 as a scholarship to the Ritenour School District. We are hopeful that this money will help support school counselors in the district as they grow professionally. Missouri School Counselor Association is indebted to the support of Dr. Toolbox and the Board of Education for Matt. We are grateful and thank you for letting Matt to us to be our leader, our spokesperson, and role model. He has represented your school district and your community across the state and nationally with pride and excellence. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, Sherry, I had a whole speech prepared as well, and yours is much better than mine. And so glad you could recognize Mr. Berry. So board members, as you know, Mr. Berry has been in the district for a number of years, doing great work at Ritenour Middle School. He's in the midst of his transition. He's made the transition to the Husky Academy, where he's serving as the lead Husky, working to create a trauma-informed space for all students at Husky Academy. So just congratulations again to Matt. For your personal success, but also the way that you represent it everywhere. Thank you, sir.
I don't know what I smiled.
Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
And that concludes my report.
Great, thank you. Next, moving to 2.03, NSBA report. Dr.
Okay.
Thomas.
Awesome. Can we roll that precious film we get every month? We got a guest speaker too this month.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Missouri School Boards Association's board report for the month of September. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at the release of this year's state assessment data. The math assessments have served as the cornerstone of state and federal accountability systems for more than 20 years, but not this year. Students throughout Missouri took the math assessments last spring under the unprecedented circumstances surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic. Because of those challenges, the State Board of Education decided to suspend the use of those test results from state and federal accountability systems this year. Commissioner of Education Margie Van Dieven cautions everyone that blanket comparisons to previous year's assessment results would be a serious misuse of the data, but she says the data will be useful in other ways.
How can we learn from this unique period of time in education and to solve issues moving forward? Like many other industries across the state and nation, we are standing at a time where we can reimagine education, and closely looking at these data will help inform those new ways of doing business. We must also use these data to help us determine what individual student groups were mostly impacted by these variables, as well as how to allocate these COVID relief dollars to best serve our students, educators, and schools.
Van Dieven says she's pleased the high participation rate in last spring's assessments means there's no need for a fall testing window this year.
These data, along with your local assessments and other key data points, will shed light on the learning across our state and help us understand where Missouri students are academically and how to overcome the pandemic-related challenges presented. We look forward to working alongside local school leaders as we dig further into these data and together learn all we can to continue improving lives through education well into the future.
The statewide assessment data is being released this month, and individual school district data will be made available at a later date. As the new school year resumes in the midst of the continuing COVID-19 pandemic, school districts are placing a high priority not just on protecting the physical health of students, teachers, and staff, but also on addressing their mental health needs. Educators and mental health professionals are seeing more cases of anxiety and even depression among some students as the pandemic drags on. Detective Jason Klaus is the state coordinator for the Missouri Crisis Intervention Team, a group that teaches law enforcement officers and first responders how to recognize a mental health crisis and de-escalate the situation. Klaus, a former school resource officer in Perry County, says the group works closely with school safety personnel.
We work with a lot of school resource officers who are law enforcement, training them in crisis intervention, the de-escalation technique. But it really doesn't stop there, because if you think about your school counselors, your school administrators, your teachers, your custodians, bus drivers, they all find themselves in the middle of, a student, maybe even parents that may be in a mental health type crisis. So the skills, the de-escalation, all is very important to really an entire school district staff.
Klaus adds it's important for teachers to recognize changes in student behavior.
And they really are the first ones to recognize a change in that student, a change in behavior. And it could be something of grades start to drop, even by, half a grade, which is out of their norm. Maybe truancy starts to become an issue, just things that are out of place. It is very paramount to begin that conversation of asking that person, is there something you'd like to talk about? Is there something going on? I've seen some changes, but by ignoring it, you kind of allow that situation to continue and get to a point where now it's maybe beyond what that teacher or conversation can do to really bring that individual back around and offer those services.
Klaus spoke at the recent School Safety Academy sponsored by MSBA Center for Education Safety. The no-cost training is designed for school safety coordinators, school resource officers, and school protection officers, and allows them to earn a school safety specialist certification. A second School Safety Academy is scheduled for this month. There's still time to register for the 2021 MSBA Annual Conference in cooperation with the Missouri Association of School Administrators to be held November 5th through 7th in Kansas City. The event will once again feature numerous breakout sessions and workshops, many presented by school leaders from districts throughout the state, along with a great lineup of general session speakers, all in a new location at the Kansas City Convention Center. Among the general session speakers this year is former Kansas City Chiefs tight end and Pro Football Hall of Famer Tony Gonzalez, who is a strong advocate for programs designed to provide emotional support for children so they can be successful in school. And don't forget the 2021 Safe Schools and Colleges Forum, sponsored by MSBA Center for Education Safety, that will be held this year on November 4th in conjunction with the annual conference in Kansas City. Check the MSBA website for registration information and a schedule of conference sessions. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
Okay, and as always, thank you, Brett. It's good to see our state head educational lady there and give us a word on the EPSIP or the testing. I'm sure you've gotten a lot of information about that, Chris. Two quick things. NSBA, National School Board Conference, is coming up. The time to sign up to go to that is coming quickly. Even though I say October 1 is it's time to apply, October 1 is not all that far away. And getting this book reminded me that the Board of Education has what we would call a little library, or had, of different books on different topics that board members have read. and have turned back in and either bought and turned back into the school district, or had the school district buy it. And so we got a little library down there. So if you want to read any of it, check with Michelle on the topics and the titles. And two, if you do see a book, like we had, a great variety of books presented to us that Ivan is looking at. If we as the board members, you find a book that could help us in our journey through this job, don't keep it a secret. Have Michelle get it, have Chris get it. And if it's that good, they'll get 5, 6 more of them and pass them around so we can read them. And that is my report.
Excellent, thank you, Brett, or Dr. Thomas. The other thing though to note is that when you are continuing your education in SBA, you do have to do a couple of book reports. That's part of that training to get your master's too. So it's always good to kind of read up on new information. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Moving to 2.04, special school district report.
Yeah, we are meeting next Monday, so I have nothing on our would like to let Rob contact Brett. Fill us in some new stuff.
So last time I sat here, we talked color, I changed hats now. So just as a reminder for everybody here, the first Ritenour School District CAF meeting will be Monday, September the 27th. So we are encouraging, that's going to be a meet and greet kind of night. We've asked the admin from SSD to come, and we're asking for Dr. Kilbright, it's already on his schedule, but we're inviting each one of you to come and join us for that evening as we kick off the PAC. It's the right now, we've between Doug's office and Julie Hahn's office, we're going to get RSVPs out. We're planning on the Msba Academy, unless we get 100+ RSVPs, which would be amazing. And then we will have to redesign that thought. So we're going to get RSVPs out to the SSD parents. So in passing out literature during open house, something that jumped out at me was one parent stopped, asked questions about what PAC was, what we do, what we're going to be doing. And in the process of talking with her, found out that her child had slipped through some cracks along the way. And I was able to get her connected right away with the counselor and get services restarted for them. So, just there's parents out there that don't know where to turn. And as the opening the PAC, it's a great way for us to touch base with those parents and build that community. We did have a PAC meeting yesterday. The big thing that SSD is pushing this year is trying to get PACs in every school, 22 partnering school districts. So ours will be the first one this year. And then as a executive committee member, we've each taken a school under our lead to kind of help them to build their PACs. So you will be seeing a lot more PAC talk out of SSD. The one thing that they talked about yesterday that I just wanted to share is House Bill 432. It was passed in July, but it talks about restraint for children that receive services. That if a child is deaf or uses an Alcom device, that they, while they're there, they cannot, unless they're a danger to themselves, cannot place that child in handcuffs because they have to be able to have their hands free to communicate with law enforcement, with educators. So House Bill 432 has a ton of different stuff in it, but that was one of the big ones that was a kind of win-win for everybody. And they took, when they wrote that bill, they took the verbiage right out of SSD's policy and moved it over. So that was kind of a win-win for everybody. That just passed. That goes into effect July 1st of 2022. So that's all I have. I just wanted to be sure that you guys were all reminded and invited to join us on the 27th. And thank you so much.
Absolutely, Brian. That's wonderful. That's great information. All right, so no other questions. We're all good. Moving on to the business items, 3.01, Board of Education equity statement, Ms. Evelyn Gillian.
everyone.
Yay.
Let me start with the actual.
The PowerPoint.
The PowerPoint. All right, so here we are readopting our board equity statement. So last year we adopted our statement for the first time and we put a clause in there that we would adopt it annually. So this is that annual review, starting with our vision and our mission. And we went with the definition of equity being a commitment to building positive, purposeful relationships with every student and every family so that barriers to learning at high levels are removed. And that resources are allocated so that every student gets what they need. So that's what we're looking at this evening is clarifying, reviewing, and adopting the equity statement. So this was the first piece of it that we talked about last year of treating everyone with respect and valuing individual perspectives and cultural diversity. So question for the board, something to think about as we're reviewing this evening, is what would have to be true to ensure the tenets of our equity statement support every student every day? And we can pull up that equity statement now, so it's kind of flip between the two. Can you scroll up a little bit for it? I'll get those 10 minutes. You can stop right there for the first one. So this is an opportunity for the board to kind of share thinking around what would have to be true.
Well, I think some of the things that I have to make sure, look at what the presentation items is done. Students are able to see themselves, we're intentionally embedding cultural competency and responsiveness and common core practices in the work that we do. With every student, not just like comfortable or feel like it, but every student.
I think it's also important to note how we are not only saying that we are trying to learn and teach trauma-informed practices, but to actually seeing it actively used and have it as active language in our presentations, I also think is very important.
I would also say building off of what Lisa said, when we talk about our students, I also think about our community and stakeholders.
Scroll down a little bit for it. So these are the other tenets that were in there. Flip back to the presentation now. I'm gonna come back to this one more time. So as we're reviewing the equity statement, we want to think about these questions as well. Whom does it benefit? Does this, meaning the equity statement, differentially impact various groups, racial and ethnic, gender, LGBTQ+, socioeconomic, disabled, other groups that we haven't considered? What can be included to decrease or eliminate disparities? And does any language need to be clarified?
Oh, okay. Who does it benefit? It benefits everybody. Everybody for sure. Not just the student, not just the staff, but our community. We learn to value everyone. Hopefully that eliminates a lot of conflict or stress or whatever, that occurs because we don't understand something is different than us.
I think it benefits the entire community, as we look at the data around our community, the idea that we're helping to break down barriers in the community so that conversations amongst neighbors can be held, so that, kids are together, so that families are together, not just in school, but in the community. That the next generation of Ritenour students and families grow up in a very diverse space, being comfortable engaging with one another. I think it's about benefiting the students that we serve right now, but it's about benefiting the entire community.
I also think it benefits the needs that they're going to touch everything to us. I know from my own children, they're told me the same time. The first thing they had while they were here makes them feel comfortable regardless of where they are. The daughter that from where East Coast working at Company University. Extend beyond our local.
Okay, so on the, does it differently impact various groups? And I would say yes, because they each have different needs. So like, we can't just say that there's this need and it goes across all groups. It has to be based on the needs of those different groups, and what we need to supply to the individual students' needs in each of those groups.
And so does our language in the statement try to reflect that need for that differentiation? Or is there something we need to adjust to make sure that we are supporting every group with what they need as much as we can?
I know she had highlighted.
Yeah.
The one part that is.
That's not.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Just to turn that around, have you had any groups come to you and say, now that we have started this process, now that we've started this work, we noticed that.
Yeah, we have one, and that's the piece that we highlighted that we'd like to add this evening if the board approves it, and that is to specifically call out gender identity. When we adopted the statement last year, we kind of put broad examples in, and we just used gender. But there's a clear difference between gender and gender identity, and we left that out. And as a result, we were like, okay, when we bring the statement back for readoption, we want to include gender identity in the statement as an example. So that's the one I've heard from since last year.
That's the only
one so far.
Okay.
So would that be the piece of language that needs to be clarified? Would we agree on that? Anything else before I move on to the next slide that we need to talk about?
I would like
Yes,
to
ma'am.
say one thing. I'm glad that you asked that question, because I'm also glad to hear that that was brought forward. And I hope others that may feel like that they're missing from here would also come forward. So, making sure that we encourage that. And I think there's a part in here about encourage the Ritenour community to speak up, ask questions. That's part of this too. So.
Right. Yeah, and that's the beauty of it and the beauty of readopting it every year, because we know that we're limited by what we know and what our experiences are. And so people who have experiences that are different than ours can say, hey, did you think about, did you know?
Right.
And that's what happened. So I appreciated the person who brought it to me.
Right.
I said, okay, so as we get back to it, we'll bring it up.
Great.
So we want to talk about revising the language and then readopting this evening. Fred, can we go back one more time? And so you notice that I highlighted gender identity in two places on here. There's at the very beginning, because we did not line it out in our definition. And then in tenet number 10, we did not line out gender identity. So that's what I'm asking that we would add to the equity statement this evening.
And if there's other language that we need to clarify, we need to rewrite that. So this was the only one that I knew about for sure.
The whole idea behind this is that we are realizing that we have different individuals and cultures and everything, but the whole point for reaching them is the overall goal of a good education for everyone. That's the goal. Just not a certain group or a certain kind of background, but the goal of having this equity statement is for all of us to realize the goal of it is to get that education. I realize that makes it place.
So Fred, can you scroll back to the first page? I want to make sure that what you're saying is captured in that first part. So in that very first part where we talk about our definition of barriers to learning at high level are removed, and student backgrounds, racial, ethnic, religious, gender identity, class, traumatic experiences do not limit teacher expectation of student outcomes. Does that capture the whole point that you're making, or do we need to clarify that language a little bit more?
I mean, we don't say what the goal is other than to limit expectations on student.
Okay, so we want to add the goal is for students to achieve at high levels, every student to achieve at high levels
The
every
goal,
day.
yeah, the goal of this equity statement is, to it's a great education. That's just the way I'm seeing it. Maybe it already says it.
So a statement where it says, commitment to building positive and purposeful relationships with every student, every parent, so the barriers to learning at high levels are removed. You think that captures your education?
I guess so. I just don't want our equity statement to get mixed up in all the controversial stuff. I want everyone to understand that that's for that reason.
So we could end that definition with what you said, which is the goal of the equity statement is to provide a great education for every student.
All honesty, in fairness, some of that work that's going on out there in the world and in the state, I mean, no matter what we do with this, some people may still see it that way.
Yeah, I understand. What's the, I just think us saying the goal is that people look for that kind of wording and that kind of stuff. Are you doing this? No. All right, statements.
Okay,
Maybe independent statement also kind of ties into also our mission statement.
so,
I see a connection.
okay.
between her, and I think that's important. Yeah. It just, to me, it reminds me of our mission statement to begin with. Anyway, it starts with that. It's about our students.
So do we want to put that right at the end of what equity and Ritenour means, or did you want that kind of as the closing statement at the very end of the whole statement?
I like that.
At the end of the
Yeah,
definition?
that's what I like to do.
Okay. Okay, so here's what I have. That we're going to include the gender identity lined out in those two places parenthetically. And then we're going to add at the end of the definition, after resources are allocated so that every student gets what they need, we're going to add the goal of the equity statement is to provide a great education for every student every day.
Okay. Any other adjustments? Or any other additions?
So do you want me to vote on that or second?
So,
We'll go to
yeah,
the
it needs to be
vote.
put to a vote.
Yeah, so I would like to motion to readopt the Board of Education equity statement. As, do I need to
Yes, you
say
said
as
as amended.
amended?
As amended.
As amended. Here. All right, Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Long? Of course. Mr. Garden? Yes. Ms.
Yes.
Ms. Lover Jones? Yes. And Ms. Enriquez Limbat, I believe, is this, how does she vote?
So when we get her vote, we could add, let the minutes reflect the way she voted.
Okay, and I vote yes.
She's a yes.
There we go. Motion carries. Thank you so much. Thank you for all your work. 3.02 Board of Education Communication Goals. Mr. Cook.
So I have to tell you, I feel a little bit strange leaving the live broadcast going by itself over there. So we'll see how that goes. So hopefully nothing goes awry while I'm up here presenting as well. It's the first time I've done that. So, oh, and actually, Fred, do you mind pulling up the PowerPoint? Thank you. So I guess with the communication planning and first thing we need to do is sort of want to go through like a little bit of a history lesson, because if you're like us in the communications department, the conversation I had today with like my colleague Michelle Mueller, and actually over the past couple of weeks, is we felt really rusty because like we're going through, so we've been going basically communicating right about all of the changes that we've been having since the pandemic started over and over again each week and each day. And so then we get into like real school, right? And things happen that usually happened in 2019, but aren't happening, started happening again in 2021. So we both felt like we were rusty. And so we both felt like we almost needed a refresher course and like sort of the crisis communications and things like that that we're putting out. And so part of the presentation I will be like a refresher course, just to talk about what we talked about in the past in terms of the communication plan. And then we'll get into the end and we'll talk about like what we want to see in the future in terms of the communication plan and planning. Okay, so we'll just go through everything and sort of talk about it and see where we land and see how we need to go from there. So, just wanted to share our vision and our mission and our equity statement. So to take a look back, prior years, prior to the pandemic, I was called pre-pandemic years whenever we do communication. Like I said, it's been one of those times where it's been the constant has changed. And for us to make a plan, the plan literally changes within like a week or, you know, so we've been every single plan that we've had, we've been trying our best to build an infrastructure plan for communications. But I feel like finally, we're getting to the point in 2021 where we can start making those plans again. But we presented to the board about the board communication goals in July, September, November of 2019, and then again in November, September of 2020. We had 2 goal areas, and so I'll go through those again right now. And I've also included the entire goals, all the goals in Board Docs. So you can read the plan if you'd like to for this. And then we were rudely interrupted by the global pandemic in 2020. So that's sort of what we've been. So we've sort of been spinning our wheels a little bit in terms of the communication plan, for good reason at that point. So I won't read all of this or go through it. I just wanted to sort of share the overview of the original communication plan and what we talked about. And I'll go through the next couple of slides and we'll break down sort of what those goals look like. So we had 2 goal areas. Number 1, communication with all stakeholders with fidelity at the secondary level. And if we think back, I was looking at the plan and thinking back and all that, it's really that fidelity of like what tools are the schools using to communicate with families and how consistently, especially at the secondary level. That's where, as a board, the board saw that as like an area that they wanted to address. The other was ensuring at-risk students will have success at their schools. The plan went into effect, we worked on it, and then it literally the wheels just fell off. I mean, in March of 2020, and before we could get any sort of data, before we could get anything, we've just sort of been reeling and coming back to that as well. So the first goal area, I just wanted to go through these and just make sure that everyone, like we talked about these, make sure stop me at any time if you have any questions. Setting clear communications expectations with middle and high school teachers and staff members, and creating a minimum standard of how teachers and staff communicate. So I think I'm just thinking back to when I met originally as part of the retreat, just making sure that our families had experienced communication communications consistently and with consistent tools at the secondary level. So the families felt like they were, like I said, on a regular basis. And with the tools, you weren't trying to get a text message one area, and go on an app one area, go to the website of one area, so it's fun to do that. And then the other is consistent communications, timely grade entries by teachers and staff. And the third objective is making extraordinary among the staff in the school district. That's still a challenge for us right now, because we can't even tell our staff members how thankful we are for them every single day during this. I mean, you think about everything that our teachers and our staff go through every single day. And so I wish as a communications department, we could just do something amazing and we'll work towards that. I mean, so making extraordinary is very important as well. Goal 2 is ensuring our at-risk students. And so we need to find at-risk students as secondary students, our families with 2 or grades below a D, 1 or more out-of-school suspension, and 85% or lower attendance rates. We have some students who we're directly communicating with through that second goal area as well. So taking a look at our desired results of behavior. So our goals were really there to improve engagement among parents at the secondary level. We also wanted to build keep building trust with our families. Those are interactions with each other as well as our schools and the school district. We want to identify and create parent and staff ambassadors. I know, like, it's been a challenge at every level now to get the PTOs back together. That's for Mr. Keaton as well, like bringing everybody back together in this post-pandemic world. So it's going to take some time. It's going to take some efforts. We'll get back. We're going to get back to where we were and be able to pursue our communications goals as well. And then one of the things we really look forward to that we still want to accomplish as part of one of our goals is making extraordinary. Making sure that our staff provides an extraordinary experience for our families and we celebrate the staff members. So this is just a look at our communications toolbox. It's massive. What we always say is this is just a toolbox. This is like we take certain areas. And so this is just the tools that we have sort of in our arsenal. And so we'll use 1 or 2 or many of these in terms of our communication. So just wanted to give you an idea of all of that. So really, oh no, my slides are backwards here. Okay. Make sure that I'm in the right place. Okay, cool. So, so this is the question I have for the board is this a time that you want to start over and reconsider new communications goals as a board? So as we always say in our team and our department, it's vital to have planned and systematic communications, even at times where you can't build them because you don't know if they're going to change like the next day. Or for instance, today, like you just don't know. Everything changes so quickly during the pandemic. We're in a totally different environment than we were back in 2019. And so I guess the question tonight that I would ask the board is, would you want to consider exploring new communications goals, or would you like to continue in these areas with the goals we've already set? We don't actually know. I don't have any measurements. So the measurement was supposed to happen in May of 2020. Yeah, 2020. And so no, I mean, then we had, we've sort of been, and I don't want to put it like this, like only, but we've been in triage mode, like in terms of our communications department. And that is just all of those plans that we've had, the return to learning plans, we've all went back to what we here. Like I said, we talked a lot as a department, and we discussed that today. Even as we were thinking back to October of last year. We brought back our kindergarten students in October, and we brought back our 1st and 3rd grade students, and then we paused and brought back our 4th through 12th graders. So we're looking back at all those plans, and so really the crux of what we've been doing in terms of the communications department as communicators is really been getting our kids back to learning, back in school. And so now that we're sort of back to that point, we can start to take a look at some of our communication skills, where we want to be in the future. And so the way we always put it is we begin with the end in mind. We talk about this. We have a vision for where we want to be. So how do you get to that vision? And then how do you take a step backwards to get to that? So incrementally, where do you want to be? And then how we be there. And so that's all part of the process of all. It's in the slides, but it's called Rfi. So it's our research way we do our communication planning. So it's a hard thing to do. It takes a lot of time to sit back and think about where you want to be in terms of communications. And communications can be kind of ambiguous. So I have some ideas for goals for the board, like on the next slide, but I don't know if they're grand enough or if they're where you want to be in terms of the board. So we can absolutely do that, but I don't know if I can talk about where we want to be in terms of like we want to make it tonight, or we want to sort of talk this through and think about it, and
So board members, purpose of the conversation tonight is if you want to continue down this path, we would work to create a community-wide survey, create a baseline to understand the current state, getting back from the pandemic. 2,770 students were fully virtual last year. This year, 346 are fully virtual. So the experience that students were having fully virtual versus hybrid was pretty different last year. Now, we have the vast majority of our students back in person. We want to test the communication for both. So whether you're fully virtual or whether you're in person. So if you are support moving forward with communication at the secondary level, which we know has been a concern for some years in this district, we would start by coming back to you in October with baseline measurements based on the survey.
More than anything, I think goal 2 is probably goal number 2 is definitely one of the looking at, seeing how that's effective, if it's working. I know with middle schools and I forget what it's called, where they send out a text message if something's happening.
The ICU.
The ICU. That was, that was great for the parents because they were able to say, oh, what do we need to do there? So things like that, I would definitely say, and especially right now, because we do have a need for that attention towards students.
Yeah, I think consistent, effective, because what was effective in 2019, it's a whole different ballgame right now. And to find out what measures we need to do to be able to effectively communicate, I think out to the community, students is very important.
Things that I think about here, when we talk about communication on the secondary level, I think that during those times when everybody was virtual, we see a lot more communication from teachers versus in what we've already received so far, this being back in person. So that's one piece of measurement right there. So I don't know if it's because once somebody's in person, we no longer communicate as much with the parents and guardians, the caregivers. But looking at that, there's already a difference so far just this school year. And then looking at goal 2, when we talk about engaging regularly with at-risk families, are we considering engaging or defining engaging communication with the ICU Texas? How are we defining engaging? Is it literally like having conversations, or is it just like here's the information for your child, look at it at your own leisure? Because at the high school, parents come out into Tyler at any point in time, so are we defining that as engaging? So I think if we're going to continue on the goal 2, we just need to be more specific about how are we defining that, what that looks like for active students.
So really, the next steps, I'll go through the process and like what a timeline looks like on the next slide. But the next steps, if you want to continue to explore these two communication goals are going in a different direction. So I've looked at other boards. I would just sort of like, I would peruse other boards like from across the country in terms of their communication plans. It's more out of curiosity than anything. And I talked to my colleagues throughout the country just to see sort of what their board communication goals, and really the ones they have aren't as specific as ours in terms of like student achievement, student engagement, family engagement. They're really broad, like public awareness of board roles, responsibilities, and accomplishments, or connecting beyond the boardroom, involvement in community events and local organizations. But it sounds like as a board, we really want to continue with the more specific goals of student engagement and
Yeah. How can we have every student every day and have our equity statement say what it is if we're not communicating with the families and the students?
So what I've heard from the board so far is that idea of focusing on goal number 2, specifically targeting our students that are at opportunity and being more clear about how we're defining engagement to make sure we can buy into that idea. So it might not be both goals, but I'm hearing more conversation around goal number 2.
Is that goal number 2 only the first two?
Yes.
What if, yeah. I think it's opportunity. But I mean, I do appreciate you bringing this to us about the
some of this, we, as board members, we're not the ones that's actively doing that communication. Pretty much we kind of setting up, here's an expectation, and we're asking the district to fulfill that. So is it really a board goal, or is it more so a goal that's feeding into the board? You know what I'm saying? So that's why looking at these goals that you brought, these are things that are more like that we as board members will be able to participate or actively engage in more so than just setting an expectation of we expect you to communicate within so many hours if somebody has income from the school or whatever it may be. You know, but we will be, that's more so like setting a standard, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Because it's, I mean, we're not the one doing it. It's really our direction to have it done.
So the rationale behind goal number 2 and why a focus on goal number 2 might make the most sense. You know, when we talk about our equity statement and the idea that we'll provide every student what they need. If students are having success, are we providing those students what they need? If students are not having success, are we not giving students what they need? And so that's where I most gravitate towards goal number 2. Like, it doesn't have to be a zero sum, like we're only focusing here, but instead, whatever it takes, if you're having success, that's working for you. But this group of kids, whoever they are, they're not having success, so we need to focus more attention. But if the board decides to go with both goals, that makes sense to the board.
Like one thing I'll say, like when we were talking about the ICU, some of the kids that got notice of the ICU are not necessarily at-risk students, but missing and falling behind.
Right.
So it's kind of getting the everybody in that piece. And it's just communicating things and just making sure that we're engaging and people know where things are and know when, you know, deadlines are and what's coming up and getting people engaged into the district. That's kind of what Lisa might be alluding to with the engaging piece.
The whole key to all this is what our president pointed out, is effectively communicating. If we're not getting effective communication, just blasting our people with all this stuff is really not going to be communicated. We have to be targeted, we have to be reasonable, we have to be understanding to the audience that we're sitting to. And if we're not doing that in an effective way. Yeah, I think, you know, to me, number 2 plays off of number 1. So it's almost like a package deal. But no matter what we do, we have to do it effectively and know our audience and target our audience with the information that they need. So that they can be, so that their kids, their family, our community can be successful.
We're still trying to figure out that line right now. And Lisa was really accurate in terms of the communications I have with our high schooler. I struggle with that now because she was virtual last year. I was involved in everything. I had emails about everyone, their assignments missing, all of anything like that. Not that you miss assignments, now that I say that, but anything that comes. But there were times like that. And so the same, it feels like the in-person communications is really key. And so absolutely, I think for us, it'll be an opportunity if we want to pursue like what 1 or 2 and take a look at everything that we have in terms of the whole package surrounding that. What's the most effective way to communicate with each group? Taking a look at all those, and really, like I put on the slide, the SMART goals, the specific, measurable, achievable, and relevant time goals, like that we need to make sure that we have. So it's really examining where we are and taking a look at what we need to do in terms of that moving forward. So we can absolutely continue to do that. But if you'd like to do that, I can go to a quick timeline. So this is the Rfi process. So it's research, planning, implementation, and evaluation. So it's a cycle that we go through. what I will tell you is the process, depending on the situation, the process goes really, really quickly. Like sometimes there are some RFIs that I have in an entire day where I'm like, we gotta get a message out right away, where we research really fast, we gotta plan it out and evaluate it all the same day. How did this work? What happened? What sort of feedback we're getting? There's some like that are board goals that'll last for months until the end of the semester. And so it just depends on the process, but just walking through the process of what it would look like. So we researched, we do have a survey coming when we send out to our families in October. We do have regular meetings online with our Spanish speaking families. And we have some community engagement opportunities for families in the upcoming months in November and December. We could collect data as part of the research for this. The planning would happen through December, and then we implement it December through May, and then we have an assessment in May of 2022 with another survey. I will tell you on the last goals, we actually got to the research phase on the last goals. So we do have a round of data that we actually shared with the board back in 2020. So we can look back to that data to sort of see where we're at in terms of that. But it's very difficult for us to measure it right now because it's not really, it's just not an apples to apples situation we have for the data. So we can't take a look at that. So we do have a research base that we can start with. We would go back, and then we would evaluate the plan in June of 2022, and then come back to the board, and then how we will move forward with the communication plan. This is typically how we do with our communication plans as well. Depends on the year. Some of ours are very specific, and then some of ours are, just have some. So this year really is about getting everyone back into school and making sure the years sort of getting everything back up and running properly the way we need to make sure that we're communicating back. So.
When you do that survey based on what this is something we need to do the survey to virtual parents and students. Because if it's better at the virtual, like you said, it was last year, then there's definitely something that's missing.
So Doug, could that be captured just in the demographics at the start?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do entire different strange for virtual things. Like, so send me different results, send that survey that yes as well. So, but the survey will be sent out in multiple languages, multiple formats, and so collect as much data as we can. They will look at much more of a timeline for the survey because typically in the past we've been sort of running surveys in like 2 or 3 days. We can see data back. So this will be open for about 2 weeks or 15 days. The plan is. So, like I said, we'll come back and we'll collect the data and we'll keep you advised of the meetings on the way.
But we can also look at it through the equity assessment. Because a lot of times kids are using their phones and that's their primary source. Well, there could also be students or families that don't have access to that. So I think it's important to kind of steer it to them as well.
So there'd be 2 touches board members before anything was implemented. So there'd be a survey in October, then we would come back to you in December, give an overview of the plan. So that if there's other questions and clarifications.
And the plan would probably extend much longer. We would evaluate it in May of 22, June 22. But it's obviously have a longer term. Do you have any additional questions? So I will make sure that we go through and look at how do we specifically define engagement. It's very specific on the race. Well, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
All right, moving to 3.03, update quarantine plan. Dr. Chris Silverman.
Yeah, so board members, Dr. LaChance and I are going to work through this together. So Dr. LaChance is going to take the lead.
Presentation, please, Fred. Evening, board members. I'm here to present considerations for COVID leave, as well as you'll see board docs as a resolution for the board to consider for approval tonight. We believe that any consideration we make for COVID leave is supportive of our vision and our mission when you consider our ability to keep students in school in person as much as possible, and our staff a key component to that effort, as well as trauma-informed practices aligned with our equity statement. We know that the pandemic has exacerbated not only trauma that students and families are experiencing, but also our ability to meet their needs, particularly when we're not in an in-person scenario. So just as a reminder, current policy provides 6 days of sick leave per year for professional staff and support staff.
16.
16, you said 6.
16, sorry, excuse me, 16 days of sick leave for professional staff and support staff, as well as some of the less than 12-month staff have the ability to accrue time over the course of the year. Also, current leave policy provides up to 7 days per year for illness, injury, or incapacity of a member of the immediate family. And we know that our staff members are being impacted by their immediate family dealing with COVID as well, particularly their young children. So current policy and practice for addressing quarantine varies by staff members' vaccination status. And you will see that unvaccinated staff members within 6 feet of a COVID positive staff member or student will require quarantine for 10 days. You can return after the 7th day with a negative test result. The test must occur on the 5th day. Vaccinated staff members and staff members who've had COVID-19 in the previous 90 days that are experiencing symptoms also must quarantine for 10 days and can return after the 7th day with a negative test result and no continuing symptoms. Vaccinated staff members who are experiencing no symptoms are able to continue working without any quarantine at all, continuing providing instruction for students. And if any person experiencing symptoms needs to be tested and or isolated for a full 10 days, depending on specific circumstances. These are in line with CDC guidelines for K-12 schools. So the impact on staff attendance, again, quarantine, isolation, up to 10 days of absence, 7 days with a test. We are seeing that as actually being falling within what we're seeing with our staff. It's typically 7 to 10 days. Sometimes it's been up to 14. We've had staff over the past year that have missed multiple months, continue to struggle with COVID repercussions from experiencing COVID complications. In the case of a staff member's child being quarantined, staff members also may need to take up to 10 days, particularly if their child is tested positive for COVID, but in some cases, their child is just being quarantined based on close contact at the school within their classroom. And then vaccinated staff members have a reduced need to quarantine and therefore increase the likelihood of instructional time and services provided by a highly qualified staff member. And that's actually what we're seeing in our data as well. So far, our vaccinated staff members are about a fifth of the quarantine time that are unvaccinated staff members, and a fifth of the number of staff members who are experiencing quarantine or isolation. So the proposed benefit for the board to consider tonight is to provide up to an additional 10 days of paid leave for personal illness associated with quarantine or isolation for vaccinated staff members, and to provide access for up to 16 days of family leave, which is the full annual leave provided for vaccinated staff members to address the quarantine or isolation needs of their dependent children. You'll see additional details in the resolution that I provided to the board, including part of that resolution is to provide leave for our long-term substitute teachers, and that includes our extended leave substitute teachers who may not be in the same assignment, but they're subbing each and every day in our schools, providing up to 10 days of leave for them. As you would understand, most of our substitute teachers are not, do not have healthcare, are working multiple part-time jobs, and subbing in multiple school districts, and providing them that security benefit would only increase their likelihood to continue to work with us and take on our sub positions. I'm open to any questions.
Wait, I want to understand it. So substitute that works for us a lot, it's COVID, we're gonna give 10 days or 16 days of paid leave.
Yes, we've had a difficult time filling sub needs. And often the response we get is, I'm concerned about getting COVID, because if I get COVID, then I not only am I not working for you and not getting paid, I'm also not working my other job and not getting paid. So particularly those subs that will take on 6 days or more continuously, that would help encourage that. And that has been a challenge.
We didn't talk about this last week, did we?
I'm sorry.
We didn't talk about this last week.
We did not talk about this specifically last week.
Yeah, and the other, so that's correct. And one of the challenges that we're facing, also board members, is going from 2,770 fully virtual kids to 346. So huge numbers of in-person kids. The reality is that we have about 2 or 3 subs per building at work every day. We have about 2 or 3 vacant classes in every class every day. So what that looks like at Ritenour High School, we have 1 staff member that might be monitoring 4 or 5 classes on our worst days that are covered in the auditorium with students being socially distanced. So we think this could be a lever that when subs have choices, they could choose us. Handful of districts that I'm aware of in these last 2 weeks have made decisions to increase their sub pay even further. So there's very much that we've already raised our sub rate to a very competitive level. But I think this could be the lever that could cause subs to choose us, because we put good plans together. We're acting based on data, but every day that a child doesn't have a teacher, it's a data. One other change that was made was what was shared was we're looking at a retroactive date, because if the board would approve this, it would be retroactive going back to July 1. We had considered August 18th being the implementation date, but we saw that we would be leaving out some members of the support staff. Members of the support staff, their contract starts July 1. August 18 is the start date for certified staff, so that would disparately impact support staff.
Just another specific detail. For example, today we have 15 classroom teacher positions available for subs. Only 7 of those 15 were filled today. And on probably an every other day basis, the sub shortage is an ongoing conversation with the HR professionals in the region. And typically the emails are wanting to know, what are you providing to your subs? How much are you paying them? What benefits are you providing them? Because everyone wants to ratchet that up. And I try not to respond to those emails.
Good idea.
And I believe we have many subs who want to pursue teaching at some point, and there is some part of their education moving towards teaching, and many of them are very loyal to their and have been working with us for years. I want to continue to do that.
We don't have any full-time paid substitutes.
Full-time?
No.
So we have a few subs in some locations that are the most difficult to fill, which honestly is our middle school positions, and we're finding at the high school position. And we have been identifying subs, 2 for each middle school, that we guarantee that they will have a sub position each and every day.
Okay.
And so we have identified them early and assigned them to the middle schools. And at times they weren't needed, and they were needed in another building, and we moved into another building. And we were in the process of doing the same for Ritenour High School, identifying. It's always been somewhat informal, subs who just sign up every day, but we know there's going to be openings, so we're being more proactive than just signing.
But they're not a full-time employee, I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
correct. They're not a full-time employee at this
Yeah, I mean, this was a long while ago, when I substituted at Pattonville. I never went up to their high school because their high school had this core group that was always there. And I'd always been told that they had two permanent teachers, full-time benefits, everything.
Yeah.
That they would be the first two called on to do substitutes. Then you had this core group of probably 8 or 10 that call these first before you call anybody else to the high school. So I don't know, Pattonville has a few more dollars in the bank than we do and everything, but if we could think more along those lines of having not only dedicated substitutes to middle schools, to the high schools, to the early childhood center, we could entice them over the long haul with guaranteeing them hours.
And
Well,
potentially
because
they
it
become
is-
staff members that we would hire for full-time
Yeah, like,
positions.
you know, like Pattonville would say, if they ever had the day where they didn't need these two to substitute, they'd put them on special projects. You know, they were always utilizing them for something if they weren't in the classroom.
Dr. Kilbright mentioned a retention grant that the state is providing districts to apply for, and that allows for districts to allocate funds specific to that reason. So that would be something that we plan to consider with that retention grant that should be coming our way, that we should hear about typically in February. So that could be something we can consider moving forward. Absolutely, as a potential strategy for ensuring classrooms are filled, but also as a way to potentially provide an avenue for a sub to then at some point become a teacher assigned to the classroom full time.
Right.
Before, but it's an option for that we're talking about considering as part of the grant application.
Well, the positive thing I think about having a couple of permanent subs is that they're not going from one district to another. They're staying here. So since we're worried about COVID, I know one person who has always been a sub at the high school and loved it, and she won't come back because of COVID. So you got somebody that's teaching here one day, and then maybe a week over in another district. We don't know what their COVID stuff is, and then they come back to us. You know,
Right.
so if you get permanent, you say you're only going to be in our regular school. You know, it might work out to be a real benefit.
I think it's consistency also with students, because I know even when I was going to school, you get to know yourself.
Yes.
And a
I
lot of them,
think, and I said, you said that last night, did you? Yeah.
One challenge we're finding too is the state has again approved that subs do not need to have 60 credit hours instruction, but they only approve them through December 31st. So that's a challenge to wait and see if it'll be extended throughout the year. So I in fact spoke to someone today and let them know that yes, we will bring them on. They have 30 credit hours. We would love to bring them on board, but we don't know what the future will hold in terms of that piece.
But you never know. You know, some substitutes do it, and then I mean, I can think of a couple different teachers at the high school who just took it on. They already had a degree, but not in teaching, and then they wound up getting their master's in education, so
That's
that
the
they could,
idea.
so that they could teach
That's the
permanently.
idea.
You know, so
I personally started subbing myself
Uh-huh.
got into education. I was working in construction and had some winters where we were less busy, so started subbing. Fell in love with engineering. I totally see that point.
So our partnership with St. Louis University on this point, the new Billiken Teacher Corps, it's a one-year master's in teaching program for graduates that have degrees in other disciplines. 15 spots every year, full scholarships. And so in talking with Dr. Ritter, it's targeting some Ritter grads that have gone on, got 4-year degrees, and are considering education. So, you know, that can be the sub pool as well. A lot of these people have 4-year degrees. They're considering their teacher certification, but a partnership with SLU could be a fast path. So. Other questions, board members?
I think we got a little sidetracked from this actually being about the COVID. So my question is, it's on number 2, where it says says the qualifying condition for COVID-19 leave, all district staff, the board will provide access up to 60 days. Don't we already do that?
So 16 days of leave is what's granted each year, but 7 days is for family leave. So if it's for a positive child, a quarantined child, and if it's above and beyond 7 days, it's no longer family leave. And staff members would have to use their personal days. So
We've had 2 staff members so far that has impacted them. One previously, one right now, where they're limited to 7 days of family leave. After that, they can use their personal days if they haven't used them already. But beyond that, they would be unpaid if their child continues to be ill or goes beyond that initial isolation phase
So this takes it from the 7 days to the 16 days.
to the full
And
16.
does that includes if they actually are positive or just on quarantine because of their school putting them on quarantine?
Either of the two. So they would provide documentation that their school has put them on quarantine or that their child is positive and they're caring for the child.
So board members, at this point, we are not tracking vaccination status of employees. The only time at this point that an employee would need to provide their vaccination status is through contact tracing, if there's been close contact.
So I've got a question. Have we had anybody that's been vaccinated and then got COVID after they've been vaccinated?
We've had 3 of those situations this current since July 1. 3 of those.
So there have been positives that have been vaccinated. What we do see is we see a shorter length of time away, average about 6 days versus about 9 days for unvaccinated. And that's the benefit, making the connection to subs, that conversation we were having, we're already struggling to cover classrooms. And if we can shorten the duration, get staff members back so that they're not ill, not symptomatic, it benefits kids.
3 staff members who have been vaccinated, 15 staff members who have not.
Have any data that shows the ones that were not vaccinated and got it, and then they got it a second time, and they never got it again?
We don't, but we do have people, not this year, school year.
Yeah.
But we do have people in the district who have gotten COVID and have experienced more than one quarantine after that. So we had that, not that they were verified to get it the second time, but they experienced multiple quarantines after. CDC, if you often reference the CDC, states that the unvaccinated persons are more than twice as likely to get COVID again compared to a vaccinated person. So far, I don't have data to back that up. In our district, use additional quarantine. Typically, not a concern.
So the quarantines, I understand because they get it, but I don't have anything says they did get it after having some of their time. I'm just thinking about, are we getting ourselves into a bind here where we're going to give this incentive and we're helping these people, but then I guess and somebody else is going to be not vaccinated, get it, and then they get it a second time, but we don't have the data that shows that.
Not yet.
Just the quarantine. We don't have the data that shows that. Okay.
We do have data. Not data, but there's obviously data of people who think they have COVID, they go to the doctor and they get something. So
Yeah, right.
that happens
Yeah.
too.
So moved.
The updated quarantine plan
And adopt the
And
resolution.
adopt the resolution.
Oh, the resolution, okay.
Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Lomas?
Yes.
Ms. Garnet?
Yes.
Ms. Warner? Yes. Ms. Rodriguez, Ms. what? I know, I was thinking about that, the timing between it. Mrs. Overco?
No, what do I say when I? But, I can't remember. Abstain. No. I was thinking it's
Sustain.
sustain, I know it's got sustain. If you make the motion, I didn't get it. All right.
Way over here.
Got it.
And she votes yes, and I also vote yes. Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Johannes. Alright, moving to 3.04, first reading policy ACJ, educational equity. Dr. Chris Pilgrim.
Thank you, Dr. Elvin Wilson. So board members, this was policy ACJ. This came to you last week in the work session. This is the overarching equity policy that came to us from the attorneys based on the equity audit of policy that we have in the district. This is the first reading. We don't have equity policy on the books. We have an equity statement that the board adopted. This puts aspects of the equity statement into policy. The explanation was covered last week. Won't read all of it, but in short, the school district board recognizes that simply leveling the field is not enough, and will strive for equity and educational opportunities by providing all students with the unique supports that they need to succeed. There's two broad buckets within this policy that will occur. The first is the yearly review of disaggregated data. That would include state test scores, review of hiring, retention, and promotions in the district. Focus on building and course staffing to identify any disparate patterns. Identifying discipline data, family community engagement activities. The screening process for a gifted and talented program. Our upper level dual credit AP classes, and then participation rates in sports and extracurricular activities. Approval of this policy after the second reading and approval would put into place a specific yearly review of disaggregated data in each of those 8 areas. The second broad area is foundational commitments to consider when making decisions. We've talked about these questions before in retreats, but in efforts to dismantle status quo and ensure that each student receives educational equity, the administration and the board would ask 3 questions when reviewing or making new policy, approving new programs, and other governance level district decisions. Those questions being, whom does this decision benefit? Does this differentially impact groups? And what can be included to decrease or eliminate disparities? Board members, if you approve this first reading tonight, when we come together again in October, the second reading approval would be coming to you. And if you approve it, then this will become policy here. So I'd be seeking approval of the first reading of ACJ. So it came up through our equity audit. This policy is from Msba.
So this was written entirely by MSBA.
Correct.
We did not change it a bit.
First reading. Sorry, Brett.
We didn't change it a bit.
No.
At all. Okay.
Do we want to change number 2 in line with what our equity statement says?
Fine.
Being the different groups labeled out.
Number 2.
I'm sorry, under the foundational questions to consider when making decisions.
Does this differ, add gender identity?
Well, it doesn't align with the ones that we actually have listed there. Like in our equity statement. I'm just asking if we wanted
benefit of doing this versus not doing this? Since we already have an equity statement.
Yeah, so
These very questions of what we just talked about tonight.
yeah, so if for some reason there's a change in teams, there's a change in administration, if it's a policy violations are serious. So it's really codifying the equity statement. It's increasing the level of accountability. So to Jennifer's question, if the board would be interested in changing the language in the first bucket, then we would then come back. I would think we would come back, make those changes, come back to the board, the first reading of the amendment policy.
Would that not get it then better in line with what we're already?
Based on the changes that were made tonight, it would be more in line.
I think we should do that.
If that's where the board wants to be, we'll make the changes to make sure this is in line with the equity statement. As
It would save a revision later on.
So we take those parentheses from one.
We still kind of the first reading, or do we have to start all over?
So we would make the changes, we would come back to you for a first reading and we'll review process.
The other thing is to, just add a gender identity to, so I don't know if
That's what you said. That's what you said.
Yeah, the whole,
Yeah, she's saying that
what is
whole
in the equity?
parentheses.
Yeah, within the
Okay,
equity
so-
statement. Yep.
I thought you were talking about that specific question.
Oh, gotcha. No, I meant adding those.
What we would have the
Yeah.
parentheses to equal what's in the policy.
So it ties the two.
Okay, so board members will come back to you with the edits in October for the first reading. Sure. Thank you.
3.05 personnel recommendations after night coaching.
Members, I present items 1 through 32. I'm open for any questions.
Mike, I don't know how this falls within our personnel recommendations tonight. That might be considered that the amount of people we had leaving. I think I had a brief conversation with Chris about this. Is it time that we look at and start pondering the question of having a $15 an hour minimum for salaries? Would that help us fill some of these positions?
Potentially, Mr. Lindhorst and I are taking a look at that and what the impact would be to the budget, but also to the other employees who are near that.
Right.
So we are taking a look at that, and not in a long term, but in a short term, take like within the next month, taking a look at it closely and trying to outline what that impact would be. So that individual never began. Yeah, they never began, and they signed the text message. It took some time for me to actually have a conversation with them. Come to me when we're changing people. It took me some time to verify. I wanted to hear firsthand. And they never reported to work. And they found a better position.
Number 2 to number 7, there's no. Worry about.
No, they're at this point, the needs are accounted for. At this point, there was nothing immediate about their presentation. It's more about the development time. Something else.
They've been here for a while, so I'm curious about that.
I'd like to make a motion to accept personnel agenda items, personnel items 1 through 32. Hold on, Miss, I'm gonna do this one up so that you can have time to expert. Mrs. Belbreco?
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Carter? Yes. Ms. Loomis? Yes. Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
And I vote yes. And she votes yes as well. And I vote yes. Motion carries.
Right.
Thank you, board members.
Thank you so much. Moving to 3.06, board member comments.
Keeping in mind that some of our board members have been on this earth for quite a spell, that I know one for a very long time, I would love to take this opportunity to wish Penny the Garden a very happy birthday. You, Gus, and the family enjoyed your day. And it's only been like 50 some odd years that Penny and I have known each other.
Crazy, so she's 29.
Yeah, but you don't know how old I am. So.
You know, she just called you odd. I just point that out. You did say 50 odd.
Well, you know, she had to be a little odd because she was, get this, ready for this? She was my brother and I's babysitter when we were yet her height. So, lived on the same street for a long time and enjoyed it. So Penny, with all warm regards.
I said, we speak for all of us there. Sunday did not go off this one. Go with it. That's not a reason to discontinue that. Also like to report that I thought the football game where we honored Deron Jenkins as our one and only NFL football player that has graduated from here went on very well. I know he was very excited and very pleased with that. Strong supporter of our district. I thought that was very well. It was very nice. And the game was actually exciting all the way to the end. Wasn't the way we wanted it to end, but it was exciting all the way to the end.
Kind of leading off the fireworks, I would like to say thank you to Erin. I know she'll come to us soon, but she always does such a good job of, organizing everything and getting all the people together and stuff. So I just always appreciate the work that she puts.
Well, I know that was kind of a disappointment how everything happened. We saw a lot of good people doing a lot of good things there. Our staff, the municipalities, police departments, and everything came together. And yeah, it didn't happen the way we wanted it. It could be better. I think we can learn from that. And as I talked with Chris about it, I said, there's been a lot of things that happens in this area. It seems like, my mom would say, if you want something done right, you gotta do it yourself. Well, maybe we don't have to do it ourselves, but maybe we can kind of be leaders in this kind of thing. And bring the groups back to the table much they spent on it, $30,000 for the fireworks themselves. God knows how much in overtime and police and custodians and the grounds people. I came by here after all that. And it was probably, I don't know, 11 o'clock at night. They were still out here cleaning it up, but doing everything. And, you know, there's some dedicated people in these municipalities like we have here. And I think it'd just be a shame if we just sat here and went, well, we only let this football field, we don't have anything else to do with that. If we need to bring them all together and say, here, we got some ideas of how we can make this better. You know, Jay Fetch and group, the Lions Club came up with a lot better ideas on how to do the fair, the old Lions Fair, where we went from having fights every night to where we didn't have any fights at all. So I think we can learn from that, implement some of those same things, even though we're not charging money, but same procedures. And I think that next year, this time, we can be talking about how successful it was.
Yeah, so board members, next week, I'll be going into an after action review with the planning team. I look forward to sharing the updates with you.
Please thank you from all of us for the work that they've put in.
Absolutely.
We look forward to what they come up with.
One other thing, my youngest granddaughter, Addie, has Mr. Adams for a teacher. And she finally talked to him the second week she was up there. So she told me thumbs up, he's a good teacher. The school is off to a roaring start.
Thank you for all the wonderful comments. Moving on to consent agenda items.
Madam President, I'd like to move that we approve consent agenda items 4.01 through 4.09 as presented.
First, I'll ask Mrs. Enriquez Flipot. Starting off with Dr. Thomas.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Mr. Garden. Yes. Mr. Jones. Yes. Ms. Philbrook. Sure. She votes yes. All right. Moving into closed session, 5.01. I motion that we reconvene in closed session per state statute 610-021 for the purpose of the discussion of personnel agenda items.
Second.
Ms. Enriquez Flipot. Ms. Philbrook. Yes. Ms. Silver Jones. Yes. Dr. Thomas.
Yes.
Ms. Lomas.
Yes.
Mr. Garden. Yes.
Moving to